Have you ever been in a relationship that left you feeling drained, confused, or invisible, but you couldn't explain why? It might have started like a dream: attention, affection, charm. You were seen, chosen, adored. But slowly, subtly, something shifted. You began to doubt yourself. Your joy faded. And yet you stayed. Was it love? Or was it something darker? In this video, we'll explore what Marie-France Hirigoyen, psychiatrist and author of Stalking the Soul, reveals about emotional abuse and the devastating psychological toll of narcissistic relationships. We'll look at how emotional abuse unfolds in silence, how narcissists use charm as a weapon, and most importantly, how to reclaim yourself. Let's dive in the unseen side of abuse. Have you ever been in a relationship that looked healthy on the outside, but inside, something just felt off? You weren't being yelled at. You weren't being hit. There were no threats, no screaming arguments, and yet, you were shrinking. You were doubting. You were exhausted. This is the silent nature of emotional abuse, a form of psychological violence that leaves no bruises, but deeply scars the mind. According to Marie-France Hirigoyen, author of Stalking the Soul, emotional abuse is often so subtle, so insidious, that victims don't even realize it's happening until they've lost touch with who they are. It begins slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, the person makes you feel seen, perhaps more than anyone ever has. They're attentive, charismatic, maybe even generous. They ask questions. They mirror your values. They tell you they've never felt a connection like this before, and you believe them, because emotional abusers don't begin by destroying you. They begin by disarming you. They use charm as camouflage, creating a false sense of intimacy and trust. This stage is what Hirigoyen calls seduction, a grooming process where the abuser studies your vulnerabilities and crafts an identity that fits your ideal partner, mentor, friend, or even boss. But this version of them isn't real. It's a performance designed to hook you, to win your admiration, your loyalty, your dependence. Then the shift begins. Very slowly, the compliments become backhanded, the attention becomes inconsistent. You feel confused, like you've done something wrong but you're not sure what. They begin to withdraw emotionally, criticize you subtly, question your judgment. Maybe they correct how you tell a story, roll their eyes when you express emotion, or suggest that you're too needy, too dramatic, too much. This is the second phase, what Hirigoyen calls destabilization. And the most dangerous part? You start believing them. You begin to internalize their voice. You start wondering, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I'm just insecure. Maybe they're right about me. You don't see the abuser as the problem. You start seeing yourself as the problem. And this is exactly how emotional abuse works. It is not just about controlling you, it's about rewriting your sense of reality. You stop trusting your feelings. You second-guess your decisions. You apologize for things you didn't do. And slowly, without ever being told directly, you begin to abandon yourself. You stay because you're hopeful, because you remember the beginning, how wonderful it was, how connected you felt, how much potential there seemed to be. You tell yourself, maybe I just need to communicate better. Maybe they're just going through something. Maybe if I can just be patient, it will go back to the way it was. But the beginning was never real. It was a mask. One they wear until you're emotionally invested enough that you'll doubt yourself before you ever doubt them. Hirigoyen warns us, the emotional abuser is not always overtly cruel. In fact, they can be generous in public, well-liked by others, even seen as kind or charismatic. That's what makes it so confusing and so lonely. No one else sees what you see behind closed doors. And when you try to explain it, people may say, but they seem so nice, or, are you sure you're not overreacting? So you retreat further into silence. You start to feel like you're going crazy, but you're not. You're being psychologically manipulated. This form of abuse, Hirigoyen says, is a type of soul stalking, not in the dramatic Hollywood sense, but in the quiet, intimate destruction of your inner self. It happens in micro moments, a dismissive comment, a cold silence, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. There are no broken bones, but there is broken trust. No police reports, But there is emotional isolation, no bruises, but a slow, persistent loss of self-esteem, identity, and clarity. And perhaps worst of all, because you can't name it, you can't escape it. But once you understand the invisible architecture of emotional abuse, you begin to see it clearly, not just in the relationship, but in yourself, in the doubt, in the exhaustion, in the way you've stopped laughing, stopped expressing, stopped shining. This is the unseen side of abuse, and it's time to bring it into the light. How abuse begins. Idealization, then erasure. Emotional abuse rarely starts with violence. It doesn't even start with conflict. It starts with idealization, the golden glow of being chosen, the euphoria of being seen. And not just seen, but elevated. The abuser makes you feel like you are extraordinary, special, safe, loved. Marie-France Hirigoyen describes this initial stage as a seduction strategy, but not the kind driven by affection. It is calculated, intentional, and predatory, meant to make you emotionally dependent on the person doing the idealizing. You may have heard terms like love bombing, a flood of attention, admiration, and affection that comes fast and feels intense. And in the beginning, it feels beautiful. They listen deeply. They say all the right things. They make you feel seen in ways no one ever has. It feels like fate. It feels like healing. And this is the trap. Because what you're experiencing is not a soul-level connection. It's a mirror. They're reflecting back to you everything you want to believe about yourself and about love. They ask deep questions, mirror your values, talk about dreams that seem to align with yours. They make you feel like you've finally found someone who understands you completely. But Hirigoyen warns, this isn't understanding, it's manipulation. This person isn't getting to know the real you. They're constructing an idealized version of themselves that fits what you most crave. And once you're emotionally invested, once the attachment forms, that's when the mask begins to slip. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a single moment. It's a series of small, subtle shifts. At first, they seem distracted. Maybe they withdraw just a little. Their messages are colder, or their presence feels more distant. You bring it up, and they brush it off. You're imagining things. You're being too intense. Don't be so needy. You feel dismissed, but you don't want to lose them. So you question yourself instead. And this is exactly how the erasure begins. Where once there was admiration, now there is critique. Where once you were adored, now you're being judged, sometimes harshly, but more often with quiet condescension. They correct how you speak. They interrupt your stories. They point out your flaws with a smirk, not concern. And when you react, when you express hurt, they reverse the blame. They say you're too emotional, too reactive, too sensitive. They tell you to relax, stop overthinking, or not make everything about you. So you try harder. You become careful with your words, cautious with your tone. You stop bringing up your needs because every time you do, it turns into an argument or a guilt trip. You start walking on eggshells, and you convince yourself this is just part of being in love. But it's not love. It's conditioning. You're being trained to suppress your own emotional needs to maintain the illusion of harmony, and you may not realize it, but you've already started to disappear. This stage is where the damage truly sets in, because now the abuser doesn't even need to insult you directly. They've implanted the doubt inside you. You begin to self-regulate your worth, your voice, your desires. You stop saying what you really feel. You stop asking for what you really need. And deep down, you start to believe, maybe I don't deserve more than this. Hirigoyen explains that this internalized erasure is what makes emotional abuse so destructive. Because now the abuser doesn't have to silence you. You're silencing yourself. You're doing their work for them. And yet, part of you still longs for the beginning. You remember the compliments, the attention, the connection. You hold on to hope that maybe, if you love them more, support them more, please them more, they'll go back to that version you met at the start. But that version was never real. It was a mask designed to secure control. Once they had it, they no longer needed to maintain the illusion. And the more control they gain, the less of you they seem to tolerate. They start to ignore you. They act irritated by your presence. They dismiss your accomplishments. They compare you to others to chip away at your self-esteem. And in the quiet, you begin to shrink. You may still go through the motions, work, family, responsibilities, but inside, you're exhausted, confused, numb. This is not just emotional neglect, it's psychological warfare, and it didn't start with cruelty, it started with praise. That's what makes emotional abuse so deceptive, so difficult to recognize, and so devastating to escape. It began with idealization, but it ends with erasure. Not the kind others see, but the kind where you wake up one day and no longer recognize the person staring back in the mirror. That is how emotional abuse begins. The Narcissist's Playbook: Gaslighting and Control. Once the idealization phase ends and you begin to feel unsure of your place in the relationship, a more covert and dangerous tactic often takes over: gaslighting. Gaslighting is not just lying. It's systematic psychological manipulation designed to make you question your perception of reality, your memory, even your sanity. Marie-France Hirigoyen explains that emotional abusers, especially those with narcissistic traits, don't want a partner, a peer, or an equal. They want control, but not through open domination, through subtle erosion. They distort your understanding of truth, not by outright denying facts, but by sowing just enough confusion that you begin to distrust your own experiences. It starts with small denials. You bring up something they said and they reply, "I never said that." You're imagining things. "You always twist what I say." At first you think, maybe I misheard. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But it happens again, and again, and again. Over time, your sense of certainty begins to fracture. You second-guess not only what they said, but whether you're capable of remembering things accurately at all. This is gaslighting at its most dangerous. Not just denying reality, but making you question whether you can even trust your mind. And once that happens, the narcissist has control, not just over your relationship, but over your inner world. But gaslighting is only one part of the narcissist's arsenal. There's also blame shifting. Whenever a conflict arises, it's never their fault. If you express that something hurt you, they won't apologize. Instead, they'll say, "You're too sensitive," "You're overreacting," or "You always make things about you." If they're unfaithful, it's because you weren't meeting their needs. If they lash out, it's because you provoked them. If they withdraw, it's because you're impossible to please. The result? You start apologizing for your own pain. You start taking responsibility for their behavior. You start believing the problem is you. And this is exactly what they want. Hirigoyen points out that narcissistic abusers aren't interested in understanding you. They're interested in disorienting you. Because if you stay confused, you'll stay dependent. If you doubt yourself, you won't leave. If you feel broken, they stay in control. They'll also use selective kindness to keep you hooked. Just when you're ready to walk away, just when you've started to wake up, they'll suddenly become charming again. Apologetic. Affectionate. They may buy gifts, make promises, or express vulnerability. They'll say, "I've been under stress. I didn't mean to hurt you. You're the only one who really understands me." And for a moment it feels real. You want to believe them. You want the version of them you met in the beginning to come back. So you stay. But it's a cycle. The warmth is temporary. The kindness is conditional. The apologies are never followed by actual change. And every time you return to the relationship, you return with a little less of yourself. This is what Hirigoyen calls emotional manipulation through intermittent reinforcement, the same technique used in addiction psychology. It's like playing a slot machine. Sometimes you get a hit of affection, just enough to keep you gambling. But most of the time, you're left empty, unseen, rejected. And the worst part? You start working harder to earn their affection when love should never be something you have to prove. Another key tactic is isolation. The narcissist doesn't always directly tell you to cut people off. Instead, they plant seeds of doubt. Your friend doesn't really have your back. Your family always puts ideas in your head. I just don't feel comfortable when you spend time with them. Little by little, you distance yourself from your support system. And now, you're more vulnerable, more alone, and more dependent on the very person causing you harm. Eventually, your world shrinks. Your self-esteem crumbles. Your voice grows quiet. Your trust in your own mind fades. You find yourself numb, disconnected from who you were before the relationship began. And yet, walking away feels impossible because you've been convinced that this is the best you'll ever get, that you're lucky someone puts up with you, that love is supposed to hurt this much. But Hirigoyen reminds us, this is not love. This is a power game, and the prize is your identity. Escaping this cycle starts with clarity. The narcissist won't change because they don't see a problem with their behavior. In fact, they often see themselves as the real victim, wronged by your boundaries, your pain, your voice. But you are not crazy. You are not broken. You are being manipulated. And once you see the pattern, once you name it, you begin to reclaim your power. Because control doesn't survive in clarity. Gaslighting only works in the dark. And once you turn on the light, the illusion falls apart. The trap of hope. Trauma bonds and addiction. Here's the hardest part. Many victims don't leave immediately. Why? Because the cycle of abuse often includes moments of affection, apologies, or gifts, tiny breadcrumbs of hope that keep you hooked. Hirigoyen calls this the trauma bond. It creates a psychological addiction. Your brain learns to equate love with pain, attention with instability. But this is not love. Love does not empty you. Love does not erase you. Love does not make you feel alone while someone is right beside you. Why it happens: patterns, wounds, and familiar pain. You may wonder, why did I allow this? Why didn't I see it? But the better question is, what wound made this feel familiar? Often, people who are emotionally abused have a history of not being heard, not being validated, or fearing abandonment. The narcissist senses this and uses it. They make you feel special to gain your loyalty, and then they take it away to ensure your submission. But this is not fate. This is a pattern, and like all patterns, it can be broken. The turning point, from awareness to action. Healing begins with awareness. Once you name the abuse, you reclaim your power. Marie-France Hirigoyen writes that recognizing emotional abuse is the first step toward freedom, but recovery is not linear. You will grieve, you will doubt, you may even miss them, but that's not because it was love. It's because they stole your sense of self, and now you're taking it back. You must unlearn the idea that pain is proof of depth, or that suffering means loyalty. Love that costs your peace is too expensive. What real love looks like. When someone is right for you, you don't feel erased, you feel expanded. You don't live in fear of being misunderstood. You feel safe being seen. You're not auditioning for affection. You are simply being, and that is enough. The hardest truth: you can't heal where you were hurt. Here's a truth many struggle to accept. You cannot heal in the same environment that hurt you. And letting go is not giving up. It's waking up. When you finally choose yourself over the illusion of connection, something changes. You stop rationalizing pain. You start recognizing peace. And that's when real love, not manipulation, can enter your life. From victim to self-liberation. So instead of asking, why did they treat me this way? Ask, why did I stay when it started to hurt? And more importantly, what part of me is ready to heal now? Because once you reclaim your sense of worth, the emotionally abusive people in your life will lose their power. They won't change, but you will, and that's what truly matters. Coming home to yourself, Marie-France Hirigoyen teaches that healing from emotional abuse is not just about leaving the abuser, it's about returning to yourself. It's about honoring your emotions, rebuilding your self-trust, and learning to recognize real connection when it comes, not because it dazzles, but because it feels safe, consistent, and true. When it arrives, it won't feel like a rescue. It will feel like you coming home to yourself. If this message resonated with you, share your story in the comments. Are you still in the process of healing, or have you found your way out of emotional manipulation? Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to continue your journey into emotional clarity and healthy relationships. And remember, before you find the right relationship, become someone who will never again tolerate the wrong one. That's where healing begins.